Oh boy. Well, that was terrible. Took a break from my long weekend of working on the square body truck to watch this game. I just knew going in, had a chance to go to FPFO for Panther fans only. If you're not familiar with their podcast, chop it up with JJ and Terrence. Have a really good conversation, talk all my junk all weekend long, and then what happens? Yeah, you see it. This was bad. This was really bad, right? The worst part about this is that the area of this, which we'll get to in a second, that's the worst. You just don't know where you're going to see an improvement from, right? Because primarily, the person who was your go to is no longer in the building. Now, I got to be honest with you. I was one of those primary people that was on board with the Adam Thielen trade. So I don't want to be hypocritical here. But you can clearly see that his presence in this offense is missed, right? Now, that being said, it's not an excuse. It is not. This was terrible, right? I think that there's one of the things that I always try to vie for is context, right? Because I think sometimes the pendulum can swing too far one way or the other. I think sometimes you can look at this and kind of overreact and say, man, get rid of them, banish them, all that kind of stuff, right? Hey, and if that's your belief, then here's your justification for that. On the other side, you could say, well, guys, it's not so bad. We're 5-5. But it's like, what could we be if we had just marginal better quarterback play? Just marginal, right? Especially in the vertical option. There's not a vertical threat on this team, right? Not, at least that's not what seems to be presented. I'm sure that there's options that we could have, but there's not a vertical passing attack. So maybe I stand corrected to say there's not an option because I don't know if we really know that or not. Now, what I do want to do is ask someone that's an expert at this, right? Or more than one person that's an expert at this to see what they think. Because I would like to know, is this more Bryce Young's reluctance to throw the ball down the field? Is this more issues with the protection? There was a play where he stepped up in the pocket. Tedero McMillan ran a dig route. Bryce Young was able to find him pretty much wide open in the middle of the field. Great, big, game or whatever, right? But it just seems like we should see more of that. It also seemed like today that everything seemed labored. There was a few throws to Tedero McMillan where he had to kind of stretch out a little bit. There was very little targets thrown to XL, one in the back corner of the end zone that, depending on who you ask, Bryce overthrew him. Some people say he should get both hands up and, fight for the ball. Regardless, the play wasn't made, right? And we had so many chances. Man, a field goal situation that you never see where, where something's like blocked, it touches someone else, and then you get the ball back, right? That's like something you hardly ever see. Turnovers, right? Two turnovers for us, but even turnovers for them. And it's just like, the thing is to me is like, if you're not capitalizing on those opportunities, if you're only relying on your running game and Rico Dowdle to bail you out of every situation, it's a game plan that if you have the guys that can execute, right? They've got, look, this defensive line has a line. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I was talking junk. I was ready for us to come in and, smash the Saints because I do not like the Saints, right? But Brian Brzee is there, high round pick. Cam Jordan is still there. DeMario Davis is still there, right? So you got some dudes over there, and they showed up. The 12th ranked running defense showed up and pretty much held your, 200 plus a yard game running back in check. So you have to have a counter for that. What is the counter? You don't really have one. There's and it's not even so much the vertical passing game. It's inconsistent, right? By the time we did see Jimmy Horn on the jet sweep, to me, it looked like he didn't even know the ball was coming to him. Fumble. And then not many more chances after that, right? XL seemed non-existent, as I mentioned before. Jatavian Sanders struggled with a drop early, had a few other, catches underneath. But the offense just doesn't have any juice. And to me, I feel like the brunt of that, even though all I said on Thursday, goes on the guy that's under center. It is what it is, right? Regardless of what I want, I can want something to be one thing, but the reality is going to prove something different. This was a game that looked very reminiscent of what you saw weeks 1 and 2 of last year, right? So the question will be, and the questions that we'll pose throughout the week, is what can we do to change that? Not the immediate, not the extreme, I should say. Not the get rid of them or bench them or whatever. Like, we don't have an option. This has to be worked out this season with this guy, short of an injury. You just shipped off Hendon Hooker. Andy Dalton looked awful under center against Buffalo. So you really don't have a choice but to figure things out with who you have under center. Could you say that this was just a horrible game? You could say that, but then people would look back and say, well, he only threw for 100 yards last game, right? Now, I would make the argument, if you only need him to throw for 100 yards, then so be it, right? And I'll stand on that. But when you need him, where is the guy that we seen last year down the stretch? Where's the guy that we seen against Arizona? Heck, where's the guy that we seen against Dallas? And we lost that game, right? Where's the guy we seen against Atlanta last game of the season? Where's the guy that we seen this year against Miami? You know, it just seems like it's an up and down roller coaster, right? And you would hope that this is something that is not necessarily psychological, but more just still trying to figure some things out. Because if it's psychological, then yeah, you got your answer. It's going to be hard for him to overcome that because it'll just be that inconsistent roller coaster, all the time. The one silver lining that we have in this is there was a lot of good things I saw on defense, right? Nick Scorton, again, jumping off the page. Derek Brown, again, jumping off the page. Trevin Wallace looked great. Now don't get me wrong, these guys gave up some big plays at times, but it's kind of hard to do that when your offense isn't moving the ball, right? And they've given you multiple chances. They held it to 10-7, held this team in check for quite some time for you. And then it just ended up, turning into what it turned into. So regardless, we'll see what happens, moving forward. I look forward to talking about this a little bit more tomorrow on Mint Street Mondays, if you don't mind. Join me tomorrow. Click this link over here, I should say, above. And, we'll talk tomorrow morning a little bit further about this, go into a little bit more detail. I did see a Bryce Young press conference that was pretty entertaining, to say the least. So we'll get into that as well. But until then, y'all, hey, we're still 5-5, still second place in the division. All is not lost. Keep pounding.